Leaders understand that betrayal is common for men with no conscience. And the saddest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. Coming up. A former staunch supporter of Jacob Zuma and a current EFF Member of Parliament called Niehaus has launched an attack against Jacob Zuma and MK Party, accusing Jacob Zuma of nepotism, corruption, and betrayal of liberation.
Are you ready to defend Advance and Rebuild?
Of course, all the way, against everyone, and specifically, let me emphasize it, against this, what shall I call it, family enterprise of Nkandla, which is a scam, which is reactionary, which is counter-revolutionary. I said it right from the beginning. In fact, that day, a year ago, when I joined the EFF, I said, this is a scam. And the year that followed has proved unequivocally so that I was right, and today I feel even stronger that the MK Party is bad for South Africa. It is bad for progressive politics in South Africa. It is a reactionary party. It is not a progressive political party. But anyhow, let's not get stuck on them. Let's move forward with what the Economic Freedom Fighters stands for, and that is for economic freedom in our lifetime. And this conference is an expression of that, and it's also an expression of the unity that exists within the Economic Freedom Fighters. Many people have tried to write us off. They're all wrong. The EFF is here to stay. And certainly in the future, the EFF will be the government of South Africa, and President Julius Malema will become the president of South Africa.
What informs the idea that Jacob Zuma was ever revolutionary? I don't understand the Jacob Zuma's revolutionary credentials.
You see,
am I missing something?
The reason why Zuma was considered to be on the progressive or left wing of the African National Congress was because of the alliance of the disaffected with Thabo Mbeki, who then joined him, and he came to the fore as their candidate. You know what happened at Polokwane with the South African Communist Party and COSATU and what were considered to be the more left-thinking groups within the African National Congress.
Okay.
And I agree with one of the statements that had recently been made by Vavi, when he said one of the biggest mistakes we made was to have associated ourselves with Zuma as our candidate. Because the truth of the matter is, Zuma has never shown himself to be a radical progressive. And I agree with Audrey Machiki, and he's one of the best political analysts that we have in South Africa, when he says, if you would have had a kind of political X-ray machine, and you could put Jacob Zuma before that X-ray machine, you will not find a single left progressive bone in his body.
You see? And you knew all along that Zuma was thinking left but went right. And you still kept quiet because the condition at that time was still favoring you. You knew all along who Zuma was and what he's capable of. And you decided to keep quiet. So telling us now, how is it going to help us? The nation knew who Zuma was back then in the ANC, except you. But you kept quiet and still endorse him and still put your head on the block. No, because your lunch is threatened now. Now you want to put Zuma's head on the block, not your head anymore. And you expect us to buy that, Carl?
Were you taken in by it as well?
What I was hopeful of was that that alliance would move us more to the left. And what I did appreciate, especially in the second term of Zuma, was that he did start implementing some components of what we can describe as radical economic transformation. But when you look back at this, you understand that he only really discovered those RET issues and started pushing them when he realized that some of his legal problems have not permanently gone away. And he now realized that he is going to face down the road again action against him. And that at some stage he's not going to be able to stave it off because he is still in the presidency of the Republic of South Africa. And he wanted to build a constituency for himself. So it was under those circumstances that he took some actions. Now, I appreciated some of those actions because it indicated to me
You're talking things like free education.
Like the issue
as he
on
was
free
heading out of the
education.
door.
What he also, we must admit, he did have a very significant infrastructural development program, mainly in KwaZulu-Natal. He did service the people in KwaZulu-Natal better than
Serviced
any
himself
other
quite well
province,
as well.
and himself too. But the fact of the matter is, he spoke left, but he didn't act left. We also mustn't forget, because sometimes we tend to have very short political memories, that it was Zuma who destroyed the ANC Youth League. It was under Zuma's presidency that the leaders of the ANC Youth League were pushed out of the African National Congress. Julius Malema was expelled from the ANC under Zuma's presidency.
And you still kept quiet.
And something which has always been an enigma to me, and I think only now with the wisdom of hindsight I'm beginning to understand how it happened, is how Zuma in 2012 in Mangaung allowed Cyril Ramaphosa to come back, because Ramaphosa was really out of mainstream politics. He was now basically just a businessman, to come back and to get him to become his deputy president. That was an action which was simply based on expediency, because he had to deal with the problem that he was faced with, that some of his previous allies within the left component of the African National Congress started to see through him. And also that the ANC Youth League were not supporting him. You will remember that at that conference, they supported Kgalema Motlanthe. And he then brought in Cyril Ramaphosa, strangely enough with the assistance of what was known as the Premier League. Because people like Supramo Mupelu and others, including Zweli Mkhize, all of them were part of that group that came to and sat with Zuma and proposed that Cyril Ramaphosa should be brought in as the deputy president. Now, surely, if there was a strong ideological backbone in Zuma, he would have known that the person that he brings in as his deputy president doesn't agree with any of what the so-called progressive wing in the African National Congress would have liked to stand for. That man was the antithesis and continues to be the antithesis of radical economic transformation. But he had no problem.
This is a man who was a die-hard supporter of Zuma, ready to die for him, even if way back then Jacob Zuma was wrong in the eyes of the public and even in the political eye of Niehaus himself.
And I was one of the last political prisoners to be released because the apartheid regime hated me. They did not want me to be released. In fact, the then Minister of Justice and of Correctional Services, a gentleman with the name of Kobie Coetzee, said publicly, "We do not want to release Niehaus because he's a volksverraaier, he's a traitor to the nation." And the person who fought for my release, who was one of the advance team of the African National Congress who came into the country to start the negotiations, was Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma actually came to visit me in prison. And he told me, "Look, this apartheid regime, they do not want to release you, but I'm going to fight for your release." And although he was very, very busy with the negotiations, he would come almost every second week. He would come to visit me in prison, find out how my health was, how I was keeping. He kept on giving me hope that I will be released. When he leaves those prison visits, he would call my parents. My parents were right-wing Afrikaners, as I've told you earlier. So they were not necessarily happy to get a phone call from Jacob Zuma. But he kept on phoning them and kept on telling them, I'm trying to get your son out of prison. And eventually, he succeeded. Eventually, I was released, and it was one of the greatest, most joyous days of my life when I walked out of that maximum security prison, out there into the parking lot at the prison, and I could feel the sun on my body, the free air. I wrote a little piece about what an amazing experience it was for me to drive from Pretoria back to Johannesburg. I insisted that the comrades who came to pick me up had to open all the windows in the car. I was hanging halfway out of the window just to feel the fresh air.
Carl Niehaus even made a public declaration that he will always be side by side with Zuma and will never forsake him. Wow, that's deep. The key here, guys, is Carl Niehaus was ready to sweep all what he perceived as Zuma's political blunders under the carpet and promised to stand side by side with him no matter what. And Zuma hasn't changed. Zuma hasn't changed his political ideologies that he held when he was in the ANC. Hence, he still wants to go back and finish what he has started. Now, the question to Carl is, what has changed? Carl, sekubuhlungu kuphi ke manje? Why all of a sudden the change of heart from Carl, as if he didn't know who Zuma was and how Zuma thinks? He's still the Zuma who took you out of jail when you were facing assassination. And you told us that hit you on your personal core. Hence, you were so loyal to Zuma. And the question is, what has changed? Let me tell you what has changed. Now that Zuma has formed MK, and MK is threatening your lunch, now all of a sudden the change of heart. Let me lay it all down for you guys. When Niehaus joined EFF, he was very silent about MK, at least in the public eye. He might have been communicating behind the scenes, but in the public eye, he was silent. Then came the issue of Floyd Shivambu leaving EFF. And what happened? And Malema said this. You remember this?
Those who choose to be silent during the attack of the EFF, we must know them for being the silent enemies of our organization, and they must be treated as such. Comrades, do not make the mistake of choosing people tomorrow who are too ashamed to choose you today. You are too busy following other resignations, popularizing certain people that they must take over, yet they are silent when people decided to abandon you. Why can't they choose you? Why do you keep on choosing the people who never choose you when it is time for them to choose you?
Then Samgele, the SABC journalist, released a list of EFF leaders who were going to leave EFF immediately after Floyd. And in that list included Niehaus. You will remember that Niehaus came out defending himself to say, hey, Samgele, I didn't say I'm going to leave EFF. You will remember that, blah, 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 whatever he said there. Then, since then Niehaus started running his mouth, attacking MK Party and Jacob Zuma. Because at that time, you will remember, Malema wanted to know, because he didn't know exactly who was going to leave the EFF. So that means all the leaders, all the leaders of EFF had to come out clean, at least say something to defend EFF. Then, since then, Niehaus started running his mouth. Of course, he started singing for his lunch because he was like, yay, I'm not gonna lose my job because of Jacob Zuma and his party. I'm gonna speak out so that everyone out there will know where is my standpoint. I'm defending uMkhonto, I'm defending my EFF, I'm defending my lunch. And since then, he's been attacking MK and Jacob Zuma, even forgetting the history he has with Zuma. At least if I were him, I will just maybe, yes, attack MK, but maybe focus on Floyd and all the other guys who left, you see, and just not take Zuma on personal basis and just leave Zuma on personal basis and just attack just to show that you are also against MK. But attacking Zuma personally, it portrays you as somebody who cannot be trusted. Rather keep quiet. Don't mention Zuma. Go for MK. Go for Floyd. Go for all these other leaders, how they betrayed EFF, and stick there. But when you attack Zuma personally now, everyone who knows how close you guys were on a personal level and what Zuma has done for you will be like, oh wow, look who's talking. Nana. Because right now, Carl's reputation is on the floor. and he sounds like a hypocrite in the public eye. He sounds like somebody who cannot be trusted at all. What do you think about Carl's character? And of course, him attacking Zuma. Do you think Carl Niehaus can still be trusted? Let me hear your comment below, and of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.